Okay, hello everyone. I'm here to talk about MerbSlices today. Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I didn't write slices. Fabian wrote it. Some of you guys might know him as Lube2 on IRC. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here. He's certainly allowed, but not able to be. So, who am I? My name's Daniel Neiman. I'm known as HasSocks in IRC. I work for Engine Yard, and I'm from Australia, as you guys can probably tell from the accent. I don't know how many of you guys know what MerbSlices are, but effectively, well, literally, they are a mini Merb application that you can plug into a host application. So this thing is a full stack. It has everything Merb has got. You can have assets, routes, namespacings, the whole lot. Slices will namespace your controller to protect the host application. So by default, slices won't clobber your application, so it makes it safe to actually bring into yours and use without being too concerned that you're going to hurt your own. I was going to do a full Ninja theme for this talk too, but this is the only Ninja-related slide. So to get going with a slice, slices are distributed as gems, so it's just a pseudo gem install. And once you've got the gem installed for your slice, you go into your host application and you just rake install it, and this will come in and set up the directories that it needs in your host application. So once you've got that, you need to configure it, tell your host application that you want to use it, and put it into the router. Once you've got that, it's just a matter of running your application. Your slice is configured, and it should basically just work. Your slice by default is path prefixed in the URL to go to wherever its name is. You can change that if you've got, say, a posts resource in that slice. It will just be available after the blog slice at posts. There's a lot of rake tasks that slices provide. You can rake the slices to see what slices you've installed in the application. You can install it as a gem into your application. There's a whole heap more that you can do with them. And you can just take a look. Some of the more common ones, copy assets over, which I'll talk about a little bit later. You can install a patch for a slice. You can freeze any component of the slice, run migrations and specs. It's all well and good, but what if you want to customize the slice? When you patch it, it will allow you to put code into your host application that you're not directly overriding the slice, so it's still there, all the defaults are still there, it's a gem, but you can monkey patch it in your application, and that will be used in preference to the default code. You can configure it, so the slice author can offer configuration, and it's available inside a hash, which is also aliased for the blog slice author, which makes it easier. You can put any configuration options in it that you like. Sometimes when we use the Merb auth slice, I'm not sure how many of you guys and girls ever used that, but a lot of people came and asked me how to add custom actions to the users. So we patch it, and we can go in and put a custom action into the controller. We can give it some custom views, which are again available. Everything's available in the slices directory, so you can go in and change any aspect of your slice that you like. And you can add templates for additional formats. So say the slice just provides a HTML view of a blog post and you actually want to provide a JSON return, you can go in and put an additional view in there, extend your controller and it's done within a few lines. It's really not very difficult. You can have custom layouts for your slice, or you can tell the slice, by default it will use its own layout, but you can tell the slice that you want to use the application layout so that it fits with your look and feel. You can also add models, extend the models. Sorry, went past it there. So you can extend the models. It's all really just monkey patching to customize a slice. It just uses Ruby's open classes, so it's not really a lot of magic in it. It's just open classes. You can set your custom routes. The identify block is available inside the router, so we can match to a permalink or a slug and provide our publish action. So we've extended the slice there, put a custom action on it, and we can route to it. Sometimes, by default, as I was saying, the path prefix on the URL would be blog_slice, which you may not like. So instead, we'll put it at awesome, and you'll be able to access that at awesome posts instead of blog slice posts, which is kind of handy. The URL also namespaces, so there's this whole theme in the slice of protecting your host application from the slice, so that the slice doesn't come into your app and clobber your own application. You really control what namespaces are available, so you can namespace the URLs, the paths, all the controllers should be namespaced, and all the models as well. But you can set up, if you don't like the blog slice post URL name, you can set up your own prefix and just call it blog posts. So that's, kind of how you can use a slice in your own application. You can integrate it in fairly easily. There's a whole bunch of ways to do it. When you go to write it, there's some really nice features of it as well. So when you go to develop a slice, you generate it, you use it, you keep writing it, just like a normal Merb application, and when you finish it, you package it up as a gem and distribute it. And you use the slice command to run a slice in standalone mode. It seriously is a miniature Merb application, and you can put a control init file in it and use the slice command, and it will run standalone as a Merb application. It's really cool. So to generate your slice, you use merbgen and pass it the slice argument, and you'll get back a nice slice structure with, as you can see, it seriously is just a full Merb application with a couple of extras thrown in there to allow it to integrate. It gives you some rake tasks that are available. In the slice tasks is where you would define your own tasks for your slice that you want to make available to people. So when you initialize it, this is for writing the slice. The blogslice.rb file is where all the initialization is done. If you take a look in there, there's a whole bunch of methods already set up. There's a whole bunch of hooks. It's where you put your dependencies, your router lives in there, your hooks live in there to allow you to hook into Merb's custom bootload order. So there's quite a few predefined places where you can get into the bootloader and load your code at the appropriate time. As I was saying before, you set up an init file and your slice will just run as a normal Merb file, basically. So you can use that in development mode to, say, set up a database and pre-populate it, and any kind of things that you're going to assume that the host app has, you'd put it in the init file. When your slice is actually then used in a host application, the slice's init file is ignored. So it's really only for development. Controllers are just normal controllers. When you write a slice, you don't have to do anything special to write it except namespace. So they're just the same as a normal Merb application. Your views are the same, your layout is in the same place, and you can set that in your blog slice RB. One thing that is a little bit different is the slice URL. You use the slice URL to get around custom name prefixing. Because in the router we saw that you can custom name prefix your slice routes. So you can't use URL because who knows what the host application is going to set the name prefix to. So to get around that, what we can use is this slice URL. When you're in the slice, it defaults to use this slice's routes. But if you're in another slice, you declare the slice that you want to use, the route, and then you declare the name of the route that you want to use. So down the bottom you can see there that if we were in another slice that depended on the MerbAuth slice password, we could use its login route without needing to worry about namespacing issues. The models are just normal models. You should namespace them as well. MerbSlices will provide assets so that you can bundle JavaScript with your slice and not have to worry about, again, interrupting the host application. So you can use your own CSS, images, JavaScripts. There's a whole bunch of helper methods in that helper file. You can include your own images. There's a helper to get to the image for your slice, JavaScripts, Stylesheets. And to get all of that into your application, you need to copy the assets over from the gem. So once you've got all of that, when you're writing, so you just put it in like a normal application and you can route it again in the blog slice RB. You just set your routes just like you would normally. You don't have to prefix the routes, that will be done outside. So the hooks that are available, you've got a loaded hook, an init hook, an activate, and a deactivate. The really cool part about those, deactivate. The really cool part about those is that you can activate and deactivate slices on the fly. Well, I'm not going to get into it in this talk, it's a little bit out of the scope. But you can do hot code loading and hot unloading as well. So with the loaded hook, when the slice loads up, it will then call the loaded hook and then the load classes. So your slice is loaded before the host application's classes are loaded. The init is called and then the after app loads and then the activate. And again, the deactivate is just triggered by that method. You can spec your slices just like a normal Merb app. Everything goes in the same place. You use the same command. Just one thing that you do need to do is to set up your router in your slices. That doesn't come for free because there's no host application. When we want to distribute it, it's just a normal gem, so you distribute it through the normal channels and just rake install it to use it in your app. And that's about all I've got. Is there any questions?
You're talking about
Sorry, just if we wait for the microphone.
Yeah, you're talking about using all the having its own resources available, like images, etc., in CSS. What happens if you want to use the host one if it's available but not yours? Is there a priority where it would look at one or the other, for example?
There is a helper in the helpers file that will allow you to get to the host application's assets path.
So,
but I mean, it's really difficult when you're writing a slice to rely on something in the host application. I mean, you probably could, but the idea, I think, is that you would bundle it, whatever you need inside your slice and use that, because your slice can actually be mostly overwritten in terms of layouts and things like that. So if you put a JavaScript into your layout, it may not be required. There are methods in Merb to allow you to require JavaScript at arbitrary points in your view rendering. So you can potentially use those. But in terms of relying on host application, I don't know. I don't think I would do that in many cases. I can't think of one. But you certainly can.
okay.
Just a question from IRC.
I just wanted you to talk briefly about making helpers available from a slice to the host application, and if there's anything special about that relationship.
Sure. Do you mean in terms of global helpers? Okay. You should namespace what you do in your slice, but there's nothing saying that you have to. So you can actually controllers are a different issue because it's very difficult to route to them. But for a helper, you can just reopen the helper module, the global helpers module, and enter your methods right in there, and they'll be automatically included into the host application. So anything you want to add in that way, you can put straight into the global helpers, and they'll be there.
Right, so we have Abdul from Amsterdam is asking, are upgrades of slices easy? Can I just overwrite stuff in my main app and easily upgrade a slice?
If the slice were to provide a solid public API, then I would suggest that that might be possible. But it is somebody else's code, and it's like any time if you update a gem, things might change and you might have to update. And I don't foresee it as being any more difficult than that, perhaps. But it depends on how disciplined the slice author is. If they go in and radically change the slice and the API of the slice, if you're relying on that, then yeah, you'll have to go and update it.
And then the next one from Jim in St. Petersburg, Russia says, would there be a performance hit if you built a large app as a bunch of modular slices?
I've talked to Fabian about that quite often. I don't think there'd be too much of a performance hit, but I haven't benchmarked it. I do like the idea of being able to build an application like that in some instances, and basically having the host application as just a point to tie them all together. But I haven't seen one done yet, and I certainly haven't seen any benchmarks.
Antaras from Russia says, no, there isn't a performance overhead, and I agree. Basically, all a slice does is it pulls in some controller from some other place as a controller. Merb doesn't really care where your controllers come from, which is how slices work. So if you have a slice and you load it up at boot time, it will take some time to load, more time than if it was in your app. But at runtime, it's not going to. It's just another controller. Merb doesn't really know anything about it other than it's a controller.
Right. And I guess, and also the views are compiled down to methods, so there shouldn't be any difference.
Forgive my novice question here, but what's the real intent behind this? Is it for code reusability, or is it like Rails plugins? I mean,
if you can remember back, I don't know how many people were around when Rails engines came on the scene. It's a similar concept to that. You can basically package up a vertical slice of your application and reuse that. So it's certainly for code reuse. Can you give an example? Well, I think an example might be a blog slice. The example that I sort of used in the slides. To me, that seems to be a reasonable thing to put into a slice. Other things that I use a slice for is the authentication, because anything that you need a controller that can be routed to should be a slice. The mechanisms are set up to allow you to do that. It's still just a gem, so you distribute it as a normal gem, but you've got the ability to route to your gem. Whereas if you just used a normal plugin, there's no mechanisms included in that to allow assets and controllers to be routed to and views and so on. You're basically sort of limited to mix-ins and models in normal gems. So there's anything. I think it's really early days, and I haven't seen a whole lot of slices out yet. I know that there's another one that does credit card processing, for example. That to me is a reasonably good use case for it as well. I think we'll see. I hope that we'll see quite a few come out.
An example of why you would activate and deactivate. I can't imagine an application. I'm just curious, what's that functionality there for?
I think mostly I would tend to think that I'd use it in development mode. I don't think it's something that I would use in production, but you might have either an administration slice or perhaps even a debugging slice that really corroded the performance of your application, and you might not want to have that on by default, but something might be going wrong, you can activate your debugging slice and get some output from it. That would be one example that comes to mind.
So learning the lessons from the past, how are you avoiding some of the complications that like Rails components had, or engines?
It's a different thing from components, but from engines, one of the main key problems I think with engines was that it had to reach down into Rails, sort of under the hood, and do some black magic underneath to actually integrate itself in and work properly. So every time Rails would update, you would get breakage of Rails engines to the point where it's almost, I stopped using them fairly quickly after that, because every time there was an update, it would break. With MerbSlices, it's built on the Merb public API, so there's a commitment from Merb core that we're not going to change the public API, at least not without some serious warning. So this thing, Slices, is built on that API, and it's maintained by the Merb core team. So they're not going to go away. They're not going to break between releases as such. A slice developer might need to update their slices for some reason, but Merb will support slices moving forward, and I don't foresee them breaking like the Rails engines.
As far as the copy assets command, does that keep, as far as duplicate files, say like a logo.jpg, does it keep all of those assets within? Does it have notifications saying there's already existing style sheet with the same name? Is it just links? How does it deal with that?
What it'll do is it'll copy the files across into your host application, but if there's a file already existing, it will rename the existing file to an original and then move the asset into place, so that you don't, say you customize something, it won't just go in and blow away your customizations. It will just sort of move them out of the way, and you can go back and put them back.
One of the things that it does that perhaps wasn't clear is that it actually namespaces all the assets. So under the hood, it handles that if the slice says link to blah blah blah, or CSS, this CSS, it automatically goes to get it from the slice directory. So if you had, you could have jQuery 1.3 for the slice, or jQuery 1.2.3 for the slice, and jQuery 1.2.6 in your app, and assuming that the slice did the right things to correctly protect the slice, that would work fine. It's not going to explode. jQuery.js is not going to conflict because it actually gets stored in a different directory.
I used my own voice. I think namespaces might cover this, but the first thing that comes to mind for something like this is a CMS system where there was a blog and a this and a that. And one of the very big difficulties on a CMS system that I built was I tried to separate everything out, but then I got to the admin screen, and there's all these tabs along the top of all these different things. But then when you get into that tab, you wanted to administrate the application that you'd added, in this case the slice. Do you see any complications in mixing the two, or does namespace, maybe namespaces just covers that, but it seemed like, okay, up to here is my application, and then on the rest of the page is your application, and then a little more of mine, and then some of yours. If I were to use your blog example in my application, do you see any issues with that, or complications that would be difficult to get that integration?
No, I think namespacing fairly well covers it. As long as the slice author properly namespaces, you should be safe. The controllers won't conflict. There's actually a CMS slice in development now called Glittenberg, and he's aiming for the tabs across the top and total integration with your application, but at the same time it's also separate. I think for a CMS, the slice would kind of be the management side of things, and then your application might be displayed, but I don't know. I'm only guessing at that point. It depends on how you would want to integrate it. But the namespacing it's even namespaced down to the URL name. So there's really, as long as you use that namespacing, you shouldn't have any conflicts at all. I don't foresee anything. Thank you.